Hello and welcome. Carlton have won another important fixture against the Eagles, but not without leaving a sour taste in the mouth of many fans, after another fast start was contrasted by a mediocre end. But in a much shorter edition of a Carlton analysis video, I think it'd be rude to completely brush over a stellar first half performance by one Blue, a Blue that's been very much missed. Just a week ago, Alex Cincotta's first match of the season had him responsible for limiting the influence of Essendon captain Zach Merritt, holding him to 3 second half disposals. A highly impactful second half last week became a highly impactful first half this week. Playing as a defensive forward, he had 9 score involvements, a game high. Within that, 4 goal assists, also a game high. And just as good for a game high, tackles inside 50, equal 4th for inside 50s as well. He also was in the top 5 for Carlton's disposals and led the tackle count on the ground. Amazingly, by game's end, Cincotta would only tack on 2 more clearances, 1 more inside 50, 1 tackle, and 2 disposals, demonstrating that his second half attacking output was severely slashed. This makes sense, as 129 forward half possessions in the first half for Carlton was more than halved. Today's short snapshot of the game looks to highlight how Cincotta found himself on the end of a stat shared with Chris Judd and Eddie Betts, making Carlton simply look more polished and more potent offensively. For the entirety of the first half, Cincotta was assigned to Liam Baker, with the ball living at Carlton's end for a large chunk of the first half. Not only did this mean Baker could not get off the leash, given Cincotta's defensive discipline and physicality, but with this occurring, it had Cincotta well in the game from an attacking perspective. And Cincotta was often positioned as the deepest small forward or within contact of the forward 50, which helped feed his involvement. And that really helped the Blues because he keeps things simple, yet is pretty smart with it, and that composure is what Carlton need more of. While Cincotta's defensive work, which he is known for, was key, and probably led to his effectiveness forward of the ball, the offensive outputs he experienced was not without help. Footy's a team game, and I think he has a few teammates to thank for some of the success he felt. I think he also has some Eagles to thank for the blunders they committed. Their defensive work was just shocking early on. Let's kickstart it with his first involvement of the game. It's kickstarted from some strong contest work on the far side, which allows the open side of the contest to be accessed. Hudson O'Keefe, in the spirit of his contest work last week, hustles after failing to mark inside 50, and in discarding Baker, Cincotta can honour that hard work with some clean hands, and DeConing completes what other players started. Here's another example, and Ollie Hollands starts this one off with a clean take and a handball to release, and then he remains untracked as he follows up. Now, at the start of this chain, Baker and Cincotta haven't left each other's side. With the mark for the Eagles, they're looking for a pass in roughly this area, but the execution is horrid and Carlton players surround the ball. Baker is one of the closest to this region for the Eagles, and he must close. Hewitt absorbing the pressure has now rendered Baker completely useless in the play, and Blake Acres' decision making is superb in this moment as he remains composed. This composure placed Carlton in good stead quite nicely in the early going. Kicking wasn't a strong suit, which is nothing new, but their handball game, quite the opposite, high in volume and abundantly damaging. Take this example where you can see Duggan, Marrick, Baker and Hewitt, the only defensively positioned Eagles in case of a turnover. Carlton have a few extra. The Chera tackle creates the turnover. The absorption of pressure by Hewitt, like he's done so often this year, opens up Cincotta as Baker commits. Cincotta's a great link man to quickly feed forward runners like Motlop, who's burnt his man. What follows continues this trend. So you see the damage, and we'll see more with what Acres does next on this example. Instead of going for a more linear down the line approach, even with the 2-on-1 available, this space is far more effective, and in evading a West Coast player, the power imbalance increases. Cincotta smartly applies a subtle block, so Akers can hold a little while longer, and garner enough momentum to heave it over the top. With Akers absorbing all that pressure, Carlton not only have access to it in a dangerous spot, but also with 3 runners entering that space. And while the Eagles overcome 2 threats, unfortunately they can't cover Cincotta and the gap he's made on his opponent. Getting it centrally means Carlton can lead into previously adopted space by other players, and multiple of these players can be accessible, allowing for an abundance of options. In this case, Fantasia can lead right up towards the highest point of the 50, while McGovern rolls into his space from the far side. Ultimately, the final option that is used. I found Cincotta to be often stationed in alignment with the center square, never wider than that. I have no idea if it was a coaching staff ploy, in which case they rate his ball use and decision making, or maybe it was a part of negating Baker's dash off half back. But what he may have negated through defense was enabling him with offense, because that corridor movement, he was a heavy part of it, as we've noted with the previous example, and it held Baker accountable. Here's a good example of that where he starts centrally. You can see Zach Williams and McGovern are just behind him, with who I'll say is Hudson O'Keefe. This is the kick that opens everything up and brings Cincotta into the game. The kick's that bad, it's good, because Fantasia's man sets up for the kick to reach De Koning, only for it to end up well short, defeating the predictable option. McGovern is well up the ground. Williams is on the far side too. Cincotta is a bit more isolated centrally, but those men in the space he'll run back towards have cleared. O'Keefe has rolled over to be a couple of kicks away, but he's miles off Cincotta. And so, with West Coast seemingly without a spare man to fill space, as they play man on man, it means there's a massive gap in the middle, which Fantasia would be dumb to not utilize. And Cincotta is smart in recognizing this opportunity. Cincotta is told to play on, but he does well to wait to ensure Williams is running towards the ball, and can use some subtle body work to rid his opponent of strong body positioning and negate that effect. It's a good delivery to honor that as well, and with that kick opening up in the middle, Jaden Hunt is a part of a mad scramble to contain the Blues counter-attack. In doing so, he leaves Hewitt open as he tries to account for 2. So even if this mark was dropped, Carlton would also have a ground level advantage. But yeah, here's a prime example of your smarter players being in stronger positions and strong results arising from that. In the final 7 or so minutes though, it seemed like West Coast made a magnet move. Baker came up to the stoppages, meaning West Coast had more reliability at stoppages. And Cincotta was no longer a connector in Carlton attacks and was negated for impact. While in the final 40 seconds, you're not bound to take risks, you'll see structurally after Silvani gets rid, while there may be options, we're playing a very narrow-minded game. Now, given the massive disparity with Cincotta's stats from half to half, you're probably wondering what changed. Well, from a Cincotta perspective, practically nothing. His impact was existent when he got it, but that was brief. He was corridor-centric until, say, the final 10 minutes of the half when Baker pushed forward and he was held more accountable defensively. Now, generally the opportunities were fewer. To paint a picture, the Eagles spent more time in forward half in the third as they collectively lifted, getting more inside 50s as well. We mentioned last week, deep entries by the opposition chop Carlton off at the limbs, and with that being more occurrent, Carlton's scoring from defensive 50 dried up, as they utilised the boundary line more so. This indicated a state of play that didn't optimise Cincotta and his method of involvement in the first half. That said, there definitely were chances for him to buff his stats up, which would suggest that Carlton still played with a bit of dare, or with elements of similarity to their first half, dispelling that narrative that they don't. They just simply weren't as opportunistic. This is a great example that demonstrates that, with Fogarty taking an important mark on centre wing. I noticed that these opportunities often occur via contest or a down-the-line play, where the game's played quite narrowly, but the few players outside of the contest have a lot of room to operate. Now, much like the Silvani example earlier, we've banked on luck from the first kick. Granted, that shows a bit of system flaw, but we do get an optimal outcome from this nonetheless. McGovern's teammate admits defeat after getting hit in the eye, and that's when you can start funneling it into the corridor as you close in on goal, which McGovern does as Cincotta runs into the space over his shoulder. Much like that second quarter opportunity, only this time he drops the mark. It's a concern we need these lucky breaks to pivot and change direction, but at least this is how we've executed when given the opportunity, and Cincotta was brought into the game because of it. But my God, remember that comment about our kicking efficiency? Well, it seemed like that effective handball in the first half lessened in volume. And I think more Carlton kicking, despite being optimal for the conditions, was a less than ideal strategy if we wanted to give players forward of the ball like Cincotta opportunity, leading to a far prettier Carlton performance. And we're going to be in for a rude awakening if we can't hit targets in this sort of game scenario. Overall, I think nothing takes away from the fact Alex Cincotta has been sorely missed. Playing ahead of the ball displays both his perks offensively and defensively, especially with his footy smarts. But it is a concern should he play that position that when, because it is not a matter of if, when Carlton struggle for field positioning, Cincotta merely doesn't exist. What did you think of Cincotta and his game? What do you think he provides that we've been missing? And what do you think he fell victim to when his impact went out the window in the second half? Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back for another Carlton analysis next week. But until then, stay safe, chat to you soon, and bye for now.